And a CSIRO plant disease expert is concerned about the knock-on effect Myrtle Rust could have on many primary industries right across the state. Myrtle Rust was first discovered in Australia in 2010. It was only detected here in WA in June when it was found on several plants on an East Kimberley cattle station. Dr. Mariana Campos is part of a recently formed national working group on the fungal disease and says if it spreads, it will cause major problems.
There could be huge impacts, both direct and indirect. So Myrtle Rust directly impacts Myrtaceae species, so it can impact all sorts of Melaleuca, eucalyptus, guava, myrtle, lemon myrtle, and cut flower industries, for example. It could affect in the southwest of WA the forestry industry, but I think the biggest thing that's not often talked about are the indirect impacts. So there's a ripple effect, and if it affects the forests and mostly the canopy trees, so the Myrtaceae have eucalypts, melaleucas, jarrah, merry, wandoo, peppermints, all of these trees that people are so familiar with. If the canopy dies, then you open up for light, and then you have a huge incursion of weeds underneath. You can have a huge ecosystem change. And with that, you could also bring other issues such as raising of the water table, increased salinity, acidification of the soil, and just a complete overhaul of the ecosystem, really. So, yeah, it could impact everything and everyone.
So how important is it that we do keep it out of the southwest, and what is being done to make sure it doesn't spread?
It's critical that we keep it out of WA as a whole and the southwest, where it's more likely to have climate suitability. WA has measures in place to prevent the movement of Myrtaceae species from anywhere else in the world or Australia. So there are no imports of Myrtaceae species to prevent it. But I think that we can do more by engaging with the community so that everyone can spot it and report it. And we can also increase our very own biosecurity measures. Passengers, for example, flying from Queensland, it'd be great if they came only with clean and washed clothes, and that all shoes were cleaned before travel. So I think that it's increasing the awareness and it's increasing the detection.
We touched on the southwest region and how it might be impacted. What about the Kimberley, and how do the climatic differences between those two regions impact the potential spread?
There are climate models to assess how suitable the climates are for Myrtle Rust. The Kimberley is not super suitable, but there are pockets which might be. So I believe that in the Kimberley it will be hard to find the occasions where the climate suitability is there, as well as the young growth, as well as the wind blowing in with the spores. So it might be a rarer occasion to have it establish, and if it establishes, it will probably be a slower spread as well. However, in the southwest, the situation is a bit different because there is a better climate match, and there's also a higher density of suitable hosts and higher population density. So you'd be more likely to spread it not just by wind, but with people movement as well.
In an agricultural sense or industrial sense, would the southwest also be more susceptible with the industries that are down there?
The southwest would be more susceptible in terms of forestry and cut flower, I believe. There aren't too many horticultural species that are Myrtaceae that we consume, so that wouldn't be the highest risk, but it's definitely linked in with the environmental component. So as I said before, the ripple effect, if it affects the whole of the environment, the whole of the southwest, then there will be a consequence for industries, all of them.
What are the next steps for WA in tackling this biosecurity threat?
So WA will have another surveillance round next year in winter to check what's going on. And WA has now what's called a working group, where people from multiple jurisdictions, different departments get together and discuss how the issue is handled. And there's also a national working group which WA has representatives in. And this is all to raise awareness, to implement action, and to make sure that we prevent. If we can't prevent, that we contain, and if we can eradicate, that we do so. It's really important to continue doing research. We still know very little about those cascading effects, and we know very little about other strains as well.
Is there enough investment going into Myrtle Rust at a government or an industry level?
There's been very little investment in a coordinated way. So far, the APBSF has provided lots of small grants as stepping stones for key researchers, mostly in Queensland, but it's very hard to implement large-scale studies or long-term studies, and ecology studies tend to be really complicated as well because there are many factors to consider. So I think that a coordinated approach, getting a baseline of information before we have it in WA, and then if we do have it afterwards, we'll know what the changes were. And it's not purely just to see how it's changed. It's so that we can implement controls and that we can also restore ecosystems to what we knew they used to be.
CSIRO research scientist Dr. Mariana Campos with Steph Sinclair. Here on the Country Hour, 13 past 12. Well, it was supposed to be the group